Okay, here we are again, and we looked at the in-text documentation that goes within the paper, but now this is where we see the works cited page, which is the last page or pages of a paper, and it gives the full information on every source that was cited within your paper. All right, Purdue OWL again. Basic rules are that you start it on a separate page at the end, and it should still have your last name and page number in the upper right. Call it works cited and center the words at the top of the page. But then you need to start your entries at the left margin. And they're all double spaced. And if they go on to a second line or a third or a fourth, then they should be indented ½ inch. So just hit the tab button on the keyboard. All right. Okay. We do author's last name first because that's the way that you would look things up, like in an index. That's how you find people. So it could be Kenneth Burke becomes Burke, Kenneth, or David M. Levy is Levy, David M., or David Foster Wallace is Wallace, David Foster. I don't think you're doing more than one work by an author, so I'm just going to skip that. You don't have to do a whole lot of sources here anyway. If there's no known author, then you just don't have them. If all you have to do is Boring Postcards USA, well, that's it. Go to the next one. Okay, there's slightly different formats for the kinds of sources that you use, and the basic template that they all come from is the one for books. Okay, here's the general format for any citation, and you only give as many of these elements as you can. You would have the author first, then the title of container. That means if it came, if the story or the poem came from a larger book. Then other contributors, version, number, if it's a journal, publisher, publication date, URL or DOI. Okay, it's easier if we just see examples. Okay, for a book, that's the easiest one. Last name, first name, title of the book in italics, publisher, and year. That's all you have to have. You don't have to say print or electronic. If it's more than one author, we do the last name first only in the first author. And if it's a lot of authors, then it's the first one, and then et al. Means and others. A corporate author, okay, like an association, American Allergy Association. They can publish books or other things as well. If it's a book with no author, then that's fine. Just start with the title. Encyclopedia of Indiana. That's a publisher in the year. That's an easy one. There's a translated book, a republish. So only slight differences here. Editions are pretty common among textbooks, as you know. If there's a third edition or a seventh or a 12th, you would say that after the title. Okay, if a book has an editor, it was prepared by an editor, that's going to go after the title. Okay, I want to go into the most relevant ones. Oh yeah, like an essay in a collection or anthology or a chapter of a book. Okay. Here is an essay and it was in a journal. No, it's in a book, sorry. The Education of a Graphic Designer, edited by this person, this publisher, that year on those pages. The name that goes first here is the name of the person that wrote this essay. It was in this book, and the book was edited by someone else. Notice the hanging indent here. It's the second and the third lines that are indented. If all you have is editors and there's not any particular chapters by other people, then you could just list the editors first. If you have poems or short stories, you're going to say the story author first, then the title of the story, the book it came from, and the editor, the publisher, the year, and the pages. Okay. For reference books, they don't have authors. If you just wanted to give an article or a term, you could just give the term and say it came from this dictionary, this edition, and so on. Skipping some of these things that are not as common. Okay, government publication. Usually that's not going to have an author. It's the U.S. whatever department or office. And they produce tons of publications from their different sections. Or pamphlets, even like the ones that you picked up at the insurance office or the doctor's office. They're just listed by their titles. They don't really have a person's name for an author. Here's one from the Department of Social Services. It's called Your Rights Under California Welfare Programs. Skip this one, and then we'll go up to periodicals. A periodical is a magazine, newspaper, or academic or professional journal. They're only published once in a while, so they're called periodicals. They're not books. Okay, here is somebody's article in Time magazine, and there's the date and the page numbers. It's pretty simple. It follows the same format as a book, although it's not a book. Newspapers are the same as magazine articles, but they do have these letters and numbers on their pages. Skipping some things that aren't that common. Okay, article and scholarly journal. These are the ones you'd find through the Mount SAC Library website. A journal has a volume and an issue number. That's the main difference from the other formats. And sometimes they have a DOI instead of a URL, and that would always go at the end. Electronic sources. Okay, I know you've been waiting for this because this is the internet sources, web publications. Okay, you can include the URL or web address, but since they change a lot and they sometimes show up in different places online, it's best to use the containers like YouTube, JSTOR, Spotify, or Netflix. And all you need is a www address. Don't put in this part because it'll start to hyperlink whatever you typed. A lot of scholarly journals are found in databases and they have a digital object identifier. So you could use that instead of a URL. If there is a permalink, which is stable, you could use that. Okay, yeah, these get kind of long. That's the way it is with electronic sources. If there's a name of an author, you put it first, last name first, article name in quotation marks, title of website, project, or book in italics. If there's any version numbers, put that. A publisher, including a date. If there's any page numbers, and there's usually not, a DOI or URL, and the date that you access the material. So here's your format. Let's go down to the examples. If you wanted to cite an entire website, well, you could. If you wanted to do the one for Purdue OWL, there's an example. Of course, your access date would not be 2008 because it's 2020. How about just a page on a website? Okay, here's one from eHow, How to Make Vegetarian Chili. This one has an author. eHow goes in italics, there's a URL, and the access. Then there's an ebook. You could even cite an image, a painting, sculpture, or photo. Because a lot of museums put the images of their work online. So if you can't get to the museum, at least you could see it on the internet. There are also web magazines. There are many print magazines that also have their electronic version, so you might find it that way. This one is specifically a web magazine. Online scholarly journals. If you're looking up the Mount SAC database, you probably need to refer to this. There's always a particular pattern, name, title, what it came from. This journal is a volume and issue number, a year, and a URL and an access date. Oh, okay, online databases or other subscriptions. Yeah, these do need to be mentioned because you could be finding an article in a journal from an online library or some other database, and you have to say what that is. It could be Wiley, it could be ProQuest, it could be LexisNexis, JSTOR, or a lot of other things. You could even cite an email, like if you were interviewing someone that way for your project. Those are pretty easy to cite. And you can cite listserv, discussion group, or blog post these days because there's all kinds of sources that you could have. This one is from Board Game Geek. Why you would want to cite a tweet, I don't know, but here's the format. I think a YouTube video might be more useful. They have so many things there, so many things that are educational and research related, so why not? That was electronic. Okay, what else is other common sources? Other common sources. Coming right up. Oh yeah, okay, like films, DVDs, TV shows, music, interviews, email interviews, conference proceedings. Interviews can be done in person or these days probably not, or you could look them up. You can even do speeches, lectures, and presentations. Published conference proceedings, paintings, sculptures, and photos, if you actually went there to see it. Songs and albums. Here's one from Beyonce, a song called Pray You Catch Me on her album Lemonade, and this is her music publisher, and it was 2016, and then there is a URL. Or if you want to say directly from a CD, here's another one. With films and movies, we usually put the title first, then the directors, then the main performers, the studio, and the year. For recorded TV episodes, you can cite those. Or from Netflix, Hulu, and Google Play, they have their own identifying numbers for particular episodes of a series. You can cite a podcast or a digital file. There's some music. Okay. So there's always a format for anything you want to cite, no matter what it is. Okay, let's look at the sample page. It's always best to see an example of what they're talking about. So now they're going to put some things together. Okay, here it is. This first one was from the New York Times, but it was online. Something else that was online. So this is a movie review. This is a journal, New York Times again. This is a film. This is a book. This is a journal. That's a journal. That's a journal. A lot of journals here. Everything is alphabetical here, by the way. It doesn't matter where they appeared in the paper, they have to be alphabetized. So we go from D to E to G to H, and then I. We are ignoring the first word here. We ignore it if it's a, an, or the. That's why it jumps from H to I here. Okay. Then L, M, N. And this means it was the same author for another article. R-E-G, R-E-V, S, and U. Okay, that's part of a website. No, actually, that's a blog. Okay. And a video. And something accessed through EBSCO, which is a database. And this one is a print book. Cambridge University Press is the publisher. And that's what it should look like, but yours is not going to be that long. I want to get back to the guide and find that poster. Come on. There it is. Okay, classroom poster. The poster's 27 by 36 inches, so you would have to get it from a print shop. It's not going to work from the printer. You can make a small one, but it would be hard to read. Okay. That works okay. This is a good overview for the format, the works cited format, for your basic kinds of in-text citations, and the basics of the works cited. So that's the quick view, the crash course. It doesn't list every single possibility, but it's a good quick reference chart. So I'm going to make sure to send multiple links to everybody. And with that, I will end this one. Bye.